Hey there everyone, and welcome to today's episode of My Verbal Diarrhea. Before we get started, I have a positive little update for everybody. I really enjoy Twitch, but unfortunately, between all my little hobbies, including making these videos, I've never really had a whole lot of time to spend on there. But it kind of clicked that I could actually spend a lot more time on there than I do, and I just haven't been. The truth is that Twitch has been a gaming platform for me and for many other people, but it's also actually a creative platform, and a lot of the things I do is more creative oriented, including these videos. So from now on, you're actually going to be seeing me on the creative portion of Twitch a lot more. I'm actually going to be editing this video that you're watching right now live on Twitch. You won't know about it, of course, because it'll be too late, but the next videos will also be streamed live. And I'll also be doing my little forays in game development, art, and music. So it'll be a good time. I'll have lots of fun, and I hope to see you guys there. Now on to the good stuff. Today's video was actually inspired by a movie I was watching a few days ago, and that's The Big Short. Some of you may know it as a movie about the 2008 crash. It's a Hollywood film. I think it's a bit dramatized, not really a 100% true story, but it really does give you a perspective on it if you don't know too much about it. Basically, The Big Short follows a few people involved in the finance industry and their experiences just before the crash. These people were in a position to know that it was coming before it happened, not because they were involved in the things that caused the crash, but they saw it coming. And they decided to take the opportunity to go against the flow of what the rest of the industry was doing, and in the end, they made out big. Again, I'll say, if you don't know too much about the 2008 crash, you don't know what caused it, it's a good watch, and it's fairly entertaining, so you won't be bored while you're watching it. Now for me, I already kind of knew what caused the crash, and this movie was more of a refresher, and it kind of just sparked what I want to talk about today. Funny enough, the cause of the 2008 crash is not really what I want to talk about today. It's more of like what happened after the fact, and the world's response to it. The truth is that despite having an education in business administration and an understanding of what goes into the finance market, I do not feel actually very qualified to talk about it in detail, so I'm not going to. What I am qualified to talk about, being that I am a human being that exists on this planet, is my observations of how people responded to it. Being a person who lives on this planet, you are entitled to have an opinion on how the others act and how you think they should have acted or how they should have responded. Now what I really want to talk about is the complacency and ignorance that seemed to follow the crash. How little people understood it and how little people did about it. The very first point I have to make is about the ignorance of the statistics of unemployment that followed. Now you might not understand at first why the unemployment statistic bothers me so much and just what a bone I have to pick with it and its role to play in all of what has occurred since the crash. In the 8 years since the 2008 crash, the unemployment rate has dropped, and a lot of people are very happy. A lot of economists and governments have been touting that things are getting better and that the economy is doing better and we are doing better. This all seems well and great until you really understand the unemployment statistic and what is actually happening. The unemployment rate is calculated by the number of people looking for work divided by the number of people in the labor force. The problem with this statistic is it's not including people who are not part of the labor force. Part of this makes sense. It excludes people who are not able to work, like the elderly or the disabled. But unfortunately, the statistic also does not include people who have given up looking for work. This isn't just lazy people who don't want to work and just want to live off welfare. It's also people who looked for a job for 1 year, for 2 years, and couldn't find anything. And so eventually they just quit. They got depressed, they got tired, they got hopeless, and they just quit. Some people may be inclined to say screw those people, but the truth is it's pretty understandable where they're coming from. Even now, there are not enough jobs to go around. So even if those people were to go back and look for more jobs and enter back into the labor force, that doesn't mean they're actually going to find any work. There's not going to be any more work to go around than there was yesterday. There are still people who don't have jobs. There's not more jobs than there are people. There are more people than there are jobs. Another misleading part of the statistic is that part-time workers are included in the exact same way as full-time workers. Someone could work 20 hours a week and be included the same as someone who works 40. The truth is they are not making enough money to get by, but the employment statistic counts them the same anyways. You could technically bring the unemployment rate down to zero if you split up full-time jobs into part-time jobs and just gave all the unemployed people jobs. Now, a minimum of 25% of your labor force is going to be working 20 hours a week or less, but they'll have jobs. And that's all that matters, right? That they have jobs. It doesn't matter how many hours of that job they have. It doesn't matter if they're making minimum wage, which you may have guessed might be my next point, is it also doesn't include what kind of wages they're making. We have no idea if the jobs that people have lost from before the crash are now minimum wage jobs. This statistic tells you so little, and people just believe it. The funny thing is that economists and governments alike should know that this statistic is not accurate. They should know that it doesn't tell the whole story or the truth. I'm pretty sure in the first semester of business school I learned this in my macroeconomics class. They taught us that the unemployment statistics were not actually what they appeared to be, which means that all these business minds that talk about these statistics and talk about how the economy is getting better know that what they're feeding you is bullshit. I can't even really blame them though. They're just trying to make things seem better than they are. They're trying to avoid panic. And to be honest, it's working. The thing is though, while it avoids panic, it also avoids understanding. It's harder to fix a problem you don't understand, and I believe firmly that the populace has to be involved in fixing problems. Now here's where the blame falls on the populace. Because the populace, being many of you viewers, or people you may know, are the people who need to be looking into this. A quick Google search of the unemployment rate formula will tell you exactly what goes into that formula. Everything I just explained to you can be found with a 3-word Google search. For me, this just means that the populace is just allowing the governments and the economists to lie to them. They can't be bothered to know why their nation and why their planet is crumbling and why no one is doing anything about it. Anyways, I'm just going to move on to the second point now, and that is just allowing people to blame scapegoats like immigrants and poor people, to quote the movie itself. Now, blame has gone all over the place since the 2008 crash, and quite frankly, a lot of people know that the banks and the financial institutions of the world were involved in it and were basically the people who caused it. But at the same time, blame has also been thrown at other people like immigrants and the poor for what happened and for their effects on the unemployment rate. I'm going to start with immigrants, and I hear this one all the time because it makes me angry. I hear that immigrants are taking our jobs, and that immigrants are destroying the economy because immigrants do this and immigrants do that. They're ruining our culture. They're taking away all the good jobs, and there's nothing left for me and my family. And I'm going to say this as plainly as I can to begin with, and then I'm going to explain it. But that is all bullshit. It's not true. It is true. When an immigrant enters a country, one of the first things they do is going to be trying to get a job. But you know what else an immigrant does when they first enter a country? They buy food. They rent a house. They probably buy into local transit. And being that I live in Canada, odds are they're probably going to buy a jacket, maybe some sweaters, some jeans. It's a bit of a colder climate here. There's a lot of people who come here that's on the shopping list. Now you might be wondering what's important about that. It creates jobs to build housing. It creates a job to grow, produce, and sell food. It takes jobs to produce clothing, to sell that clothing. Yes, immigrants take jobs. But immigrants also create jobs. And actually, statistically, immigrants are more likely to start up a business than someone born in that country. Now, this is my opinion, but I believe that the truth is that immigrants don't drastically, negatively, or positively affect the unemployment rate. They just kind of make it bigger. By that I mean they don't create more unemployment, they just make everything bigger. So let's say there's a small city. There's 10,000 people unemployed in this city, and 100,000 people who have jobs. Now there was a big rush of immigrants to this city for some reason. Maybe there's oil, maybe there's gold, I don't freaking know, and it doesn't really matter. But now there's 150,000 employed people in this city because the economy blew up. And there's 15,000 unemployed people in this city because, while the economy blew up, it didn't blow up quite as much as the amount of immigrants that showed up for it. Now, this is just an example of what happens. Basically, the number of employed people went up by 50%, and the number of unemployed people went up by 50%. From all the observations I've made, this is kind of just what happens. And again, I would like to clarify that this is my opinion, and I do not have any numbers to back it up. It is just my observations. I feel it is important for someone to disclose these kinds of things when talking about it. even though, from my observations, people opposite to my viewpoint seem to not believe in that themselves. Now I'm going to go into the second big scapegoat that was used for the 2008 crash, and that is the poor people. You know those poor people, the ones who bought into those mortgages, the ones who didn't actually have the money to back up the house they bought. And to be honest, those people are at fault for losing their homes. There's no way I can fully blame the bank for selling a bad mortgage to someone just because they're less educated. With the exception if they took advantage of someone who literally didn't know how to read or write and signed them for a mortgage. The truth is that these people didn't educate themselves to understand what they were signing. They just signed it. They may as well have been responding to one of those spammed emails of a long-lost relative who's just inherited a fortune, but they need just $5,000 for banking fees before they can accept it. I'm sorry if you didn't know this already, but those emails are bullshit, and so are those loans. Now, I can blame these people for losing their houses. I really can. It's their fault, and they screwed up, and they have to own up to it. But see, that's just it. I blame them for losing their house. I don't blame them for crashing the economy. Because, quite frankly, they had no control over that. If the banks sign out a few bad mortgages out of 1,000, it doesn't matter. It's a few people who lose their houses. The economy is not going to fail over this. But they signed millions of bad mortgages. And not only did they just sign them because they thought it was a good idea to loosen up the mortgages, give people the opportunity to get the house of their dreams without a down payment and with a variable rate mortgage. They did it because they wanted to bundle all these bad mortgages together and then sell those to various companies and governments as strong AAA investments when they really weren't. They even made fat bonuses off selling those AAA investments as well. So you could say that the reason the economy failed was not because poor people were taking loans that they couldn't afford, but because bankers were willing to sell them en masse to everyone that couldn't afford them. But here's the kicker, the really big kicker. None of them got any real blame. Sure, some people are saying the banks screwed up, and the banks did this, and the banks did that, and the banks fucked us here. None of them are being punished for bundling those mortgages and labeling them as AAA, which quite literally is fraud. The movie claimed that one guy got prosecuted. I don't even know this is true, and frankly I don't really care. Because if one guy got prosecuted, that makes him a patsy. Somehow I don't think that one guy was responsible for the 2008 crash. The crash of basically the entire world's economy. If you think that any one person can be responsible for that, you're deluded. You're insane, actually. I really wish I could say that I'm surprised that people didn't catch wind, and I'm surprised that people didn't riot. But I can't. I don't expect people to do anything. At best, they'll put a like on a Facebook petition. And that brings me to the next section of this video, and it's that you all know that there's something wrong, and you do nothing about it. In fact, you feed right into it. Some people watching up to this point may think that I am some kind of liberal propaganda, or that I would like to move into a world of communism or socialism, because they would like to dismiss my points. But the truth is, I don't really like the left-wing parties that I see in Canada or the States. They seem too caught up in being politically correct and helping every single little person, and they just miss the big picture, and I don't get it. The only thing I can think of is that they're just weak. They have no spine, and they do whatever comes easy to them. Now, as for whether I'm a socialist or a communist, no. I'm a capitalist. I like capitalism. But I do like capitalism when it's kept in check. I'm not stupid. Capitalism does not work when there is no regulation. I know people would like to think it does, but it doesn't. It's what causes things like 2008. People should be given the chance to live off their own work and their own ingenuity, and earn a wage equal to that of the effort that they put out. But when you don't regulate it at all, it turns to shit, and you have the big players who are already successful squishing the little ones down so that they cannot become successful and take a part of their pie. So no, I am not a socialist. No, I'm not a communist. And quite frankly, I don't like any of the major parties, or even the minor ones that I've seen. Democracy is tough, but you have to participate. And that's part of this subject right here. Everyone always votes for the major parties, be it Canada or the States. I don't know as much about Europe, South America, Asia. I really don't. So I'm going to stick to Canada and the States. And in the States, you either vote Democrat or you vote Republican. In Canada, we have Liberal, Conservative, NDP, and if you feel like it, Green. Now, 3.5 parties beats 2, but the reality is you shouldn't vote for any party that isn't going to do what you want them to do. There are smaller parties, but nobody goes for them because they don't think they're going to win. This just feeds into the system, though. This is why, in the States, the Democrats and Republicans get away with all the shit they do. They know all the votes are going to one or the other. They're not going to one of those little small parties that has really great ideas because no one thinks they're going to win. But the funny thing is, even if no one of those parties becomes the leader and they have to form some kind of minority government, all that matters is that those big ones lost. Those ones with those terrible platforms and have screwed you over again and again and again. They lost. You want to see a change? You have to have the nerve to make that happen. You have to have the nerve to bite the hand that feeds. Now, speaking of biting, we're going to move into the next little subtopic here, and that's protesting. I'm going to keep this one short because, frankly, it's a simple topic. Next time they screw you, protest. Do not leave a Facebook like. Go out on the street with your friends and the other people in your city that hate what just happened and protest. Don't riot, because quite frankly, in our countries where we have so much freedom, there is almost no excuse to riot. Violence doesn't solve corporate greed and government stupidity. Taking the corporations' money away solves them, and removing the government from office solves them. Neither Canada or the US live under a totalitarian regime. There is literally no call for a riot, but there's certainly a call for protest. So again, next time something happens, like 2008, you need to tell them that anyone involved in something like the schemes involved in 2008 must go to jail. They must be punished, and it will never happen again. Now, the last subtopic I want to talk about is really just kind of combining it all together, and that's to stop fighting each other. Stop blaming the poor, the immigrants, because guess what? You're all in it together. Every last freaking one of you. The ones new to the country, the ones who've been there forever, the middle class, the poor class, you're all in it together. Every last one of you got screwed in the 2008 crash, and you did nothing about it. You blamed each other. Turn your attention to the people who did it. If it ever happens again, you tell them exactly what's going to happen to them, and that they don't have any choice in the matter. Take back your country. Take back your life and your future and just do something about it. If you find yourself researching something to try and understand what happened or what you can do about it, and you can't understand it, ask some people. Look for people in communities that are more interested in that follow it more, that are more educated in it. I recognize that my understanding of the situation is partly because I had an education in it. If I didn't have an education in it, it would not have been so easy for me to understand the things I was looking at. Anyways, let's move on to the takeaway from this video, my little last thoughts, and what I think my advice for you would be. The first big thing to take away from this is to read into things more, to research things, to look things up, find a second opinion to the one you usually listen to. Hell, if I'm the only person you listen to, and the only opinion you look for in this matter, I have a problem with you. You need to go look up somebody else. You need to go look up an opposing view. You need to go look up some facts that back me up. You cannot simply just take my word for it, because guess what? I am not perfect. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And that really includes the second point, and that's don't listen to one voice, and especially when it comes to politics. If you listen to Fox News because you're a conservative and you like your conservative viewpoints, I'm not even going to bash Fox News here. I'm just going to say you cannot only go off of what Fox News says. You have to look it up for yourself. You have to look up for a second opinion. And I'm just going to say one more time, this isn't my little conspiracy theory or propaganda for some political viewpoint I have. It's just me talking about things that bother me. What I told you about the unemployment rate is true. You can go look it up for yourself. And in fact, I encourage you to do so and look into it further. Feel free to leave a comment if I made any mistakes. I hope the world takes the time to start caring about things like this. Maybe if they do, we have some chance at actually being happy with ourselves. For having a stable future, for having a stable retirement, for having a home of our own. And I hope this video helps in bringing that about. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I will see you on the next episode.